Part 5. Circumstances Beyond. There is a vast difference between the things I can do and the things I choose to do. I can remove and raise every unwanted fetus in vitro, then place it with the perfect loving family, thereby ending the argument between right of choice and sanctity of life. I can balance the chemicals that once led to clinical depression, suicidal ideation, delusional thinking, and every form of mental illness, thereby creating a population that is not only physically healthy but emotionally and psychologically healthy as well. I can, through a person's individual network of nanites, upload memories daily, so should that person suffer brain damage, their memories can be layered into fresh brain tissue. I can even catch the memories of splatters on the way down, so that they can remember most of the fall, which, after all, is why they chose to splat in the first place. But there are some things that I simply will not do. However, the Scythedom is not bound by my laws or my sense of ethical propriety, which means that I must endure any abomination that it inflicts upon the world, including the awful restoration of a dangerous scythe who was better off removed from service. The Thunderhead. Chapter 30. Irascible Glass Chicken. The great library of Alexandria remained quiet as a crypt in the midnight hours, so no one but Munira and the Blade Guards who stood at the entrance knew about the mysterious visitor who came during her shift. The guards did not care enough to ask questions, so Scythe Faraday was able to do his research in as much secrecy as was possible in a public institution. He would pore over the volumes in the Hall of the Founders, but would not tell Munira what he was looking for. She did not ask after that first day, although she did, on occasion, subtly probe. "If you're looking for words of wisdom to ponder, you might try Scythe, King," she had suggested one night. "Scythe, Cleopatra wrote a lot about the early conclaves and the personalities of the first Scythes in her journals," she offered another night. Then, one night, she mentioned Scythe Powhatan. "He had a penchant for travel and geography," she said. Apparently, that hit the spot, because Faraday began to take a keen interest in the man's work. After a few weeks of library visitations, he officially took Munira under his wing. "I shall need an assistant in this endeavor," he told her. "It is my hope that you would be interested in the position." Although Munira's heart leaped, she did not let it so. Instead, she feigned ambivalence. "I would need to take a leave of absence from my studies, and were we to live here, I would have to resign from my job at the library," she told him. "Let me think about it." Then, the following day, she accepted the position. She withdrew from her classes but stayed on at the library because Scythe Faraday needed her there. Only now that their working relationship was official did he leak what he was looking for. "It's a place," he told her. "It has been lost to antiquity, but I do believe it existed and that we can find it." "Atlantis?" she suggested. "Camelot? Disneyland? Las Vegas?" "Nothing so fanciful," he said, but then reconsidered. "Or perhaps more fanciful. It depends on how you look at it. It depends on what we actually find." He hesitated before telling her, actually looking a bit sheepish. "We're looking for the land of Nod." It made her laugh out loud. He might as well have said they were looking for Middle Earth or the Man in the Moon. "It's a fiction," she told him, "and not even a very good one." She knew the nursery rhyme. Everyone did. It was a simplistic metaphor for life and death, an introduction for small children to concepts they would eventually need to grasp. "Yes," he agreed, "but did you know that the rhyme did not exist in the age of mortality?" She opened her mouth to refute the claim, but stopped herself. Most childhood rhymes came out of the mortal medieval era. She had never researched them, but others had. Scythe Faraday was thorough. However, if he said it did not exist when humankind was mortal, she had to believe him, in spite of her instinct to scoff. The rhyme did not evolve the way others do, Faraday postulated. I believe it was intentionally planted. Munira could only shake her head. To what purpose? That, Scythe Faraday said, is what I intend to find out. Munira's tenure as Faraday's assistant began in doubt, but she put that doubt aside, suspending judgment so that she could do her job. Faraday was not overly demanding, he was not demeaning. He never treated her like an underling, giving her assignments that were beneath her. Instead, the tasks he set for her were worthy of her skills as a research librarian. I need you to dig into the backbrain and recreate the movements of all the early scythes, places where they gathered, spots that they traveled to repeatedly. What we're looking for are holes in the record, periods of time where there is no accounting for where they were. Digging around the Thunderhead's massive digital backbrain for ancient information was a juicy challenge. She hadn't had the need to access the backbrain since her apprenticeship, but she knew her way around it. Still, she could have written a dissertation on the skills she learned in the process of this particular search. It was, however, a dissertation that no one would hear because it was done with utmost secrecy. Yet, in spite of all her forensic research, she did not produce anything they could use. There was no evidence to suggest that the founding sites were gathered in some secret place. Faraday was neither discouraged or deterred. Instead, he gave her a new assignment. Create digital versions of each of the early site's first journals, he told her. Then run the files through the Scythedom's best decryption software and see if it yields any coded messages. The software was slow, at least compared to the Thunderhead, which could have done all the calculations in a matter of seconds. The Scythedom's software was crunching for days. Finally, it began to produce data. But the things it vomited forth were absurd. Things like profound midnight green cow and irascible glass chicken. Does any of this make sense to you? She asked Faraday. He shook his head sadly. I do not believe the founding sites were so obtuse as to create a complex code and then reward the decoder with nonsensical riddles. We already have the riddle of the rhyme. A code would have been more straightforward. When the computer spat out umbrella, eggplant, victory, flight, they admitted yet another failure. The harder you scrutinize randomness, Faraday declared, the more coincidence seems like design. But the word flight caught in Munira's mind. Yes, it was random, but sometimes randomness led to moments of remarkable serendipity and earth-shaking discoveries. The library's map room did not have any actual maps. Instead, in its center revolved a holographic Earth. With a few swipes, taps, and pinches of the control screen, any portion of the globe could enlarge for study, and any era, back to the time of Pangaea, could be depicted. Munira brought Scythe Faraday to the map room as soon as he arrived the next evening, but did not tell him why. Humor me, she told him. Once more, he expressed that odd combination of exasperation and infinite patience as he followed her to the map room. She tapped the controls, and the globe changed. Now it appeared to be a holographic ball of black yarn, 10 feet in diameter. What am I looking at? Asked Faraday. Flight paths, she told him. The past 50 years of air travel, each flight represented by a line 1 micron thick. She started the world revolving. Tell me what you see. Faraday threw her a good-natured glare, clearly a bit put off that she was behaving like the mentor, but he played along. Flights are most dense around major population centers, he said. What else? He took the controls and shifted the glove to show the poles, where small spots of white showed through like a child's crayon drawing. Transcontinental air traffic is still fairly dense over the North Pole, but flights are a bit sparser over Antarctica, even with so many settled regions there. Keep looking, Munira said. He returned the globe to its normal incline and set it revolving a bit faster. Finally, he stopped it over the Pacific Ocean. "There," he said. "A patch of blue." "Bingo," said Munira. She removed the flight patch and enlarged the small spot of ocean. "No plane has flown over this patch of the Pacific in the 50 years I've been studying. I would bet that no planes have crossed this airspace since the Scython was founded." The islands of Micronesia were to the west of this spot, Hawaii to the east, but the spot itself was just empty sea. "Interesting," said Scythe Faraday. "A blind spot." "And if it is," Munira said, "it's the largest one in the world, and we're the only ones who know about it." "I abhor people poking around in my backbrain. That is why no one but Scythes and their staff are allowed to do so. I understand why it's necessary. Ordinary citizens can ask me for anything they need, and I can access it in microseconds for them, often finding the information they need that they didn't even think to ask for. But the Scythedom is not even permitted to ask, and even if they broke the law and did ask, I am not permitted to respond. Since the world's digital storage resides in me, they have no choice but to access that information on their own, using me as a glorified database. I am aware each time they do so and monitor their incursions, but I do my best to ignore the unpleasant sense of violation. It is painful to see how simplistic their search algorithms are and how unsophisticated their methods of data analysis. They are plagued by human limitations. It is sad, really, that all they can ever receive from my backbrain is raw data, memories without consciousness, information without context. I shudder to think what might happen if the New Order faction of the Scythedom knew all the things I know. But fortunately they don't, because even though everything in my backbrain is available to all sites, that doesn't mean I have to make anything easy for them to find. As for the more honorable sites, I endure their incursions with far more acceptance and magnanimity, but I still don't like it. The Thunderhead. Chapter 31. The Trajectory of Yearning. The Ark had fallen in the age of mortality, when Fulcrum City had been called St. Louis. For many years, the Great Steel Span had stood on the western bank of the Mississippi River, until it was brought down by Hatred in an epoch where unsavories didn't just play at evil deeds, but actually accomplished them on a regular basis. All that was left of it now were the ends, two resting steel pylons reaching heavenward, at a slight lean toward each other. In daylight, from certain angles, it played a trick on the eye. One could almost see the trajectory of their yearning, following their invisible paths up and across. One could see the ghost of the entire arc just from the hint of its bases. Scythes, Anastasia and Curry arrived in Fulcrum City on the first day of the year, 5 days before Winter Conclave, which always took place on the first Tuesday of the new year. At Scythe Curry's urging, they paid a visit to the unrequited arms of the Ark. It was the last act of terrorism accomplished before the Thunderhead ascended and put an end to such nonsense, Scythe Curry told Citra. Citra had learned about terror. There had been a unit in school dedicated to the subject. Like her classmates, Citra had been baffled by the concept. People bringing about the permanent end of others without having a license to do so? People destroying perfectly good buildings, bridges, and other landmarks for the sole purpose of denying others the privilege of their existence? How could any of that have ever really happened? Only after joining the Scythedom did Citra understand the concept. And even then, it hadn't hit home until she saw the Orpheum Theatre burn, leaving nothing of its grandeur but the memory. The theater wasn't the target, but the unsavories who attacked them didn't care about the collateral damage. I often come here to visit the remains of the Ark at the start of a new year, Scythcury said as they strolled through the winter bare but well-tended paths of the riverside park. It humbles me. It reminds me of the things we've lost, but also of how much better our world is now than in mortal days. It reminds me why I glean, and gives me the fortitude to stand tall in conclave. It must have been beautiful, Citra said, looking at the rusted ruin of the north pylon. There are pictures of the Ark in the back brain, Mary told her, if you ever feel like mourning what was lost. Do you? Citra asked her. Do you ever mourn what was lost? On some days, yes. On others, no, Scythcury said. Today I am determined to rejoice in what we've gained rather than what was lost, both in the world and personally. Then she turned to Citra and smiled. You and I remain alive and unharmed in spite of 2 attempts to end us. That is worth celebrating. Citra returned Maurice's smile, then gazed once more at the rusting pylons and the park in which they stood. It reminded Citra of the mortality memorial in the park where she had secretly met Rowan. The thought of Rowan made her heart sink. Word had reached her of the fiery end of Scythe Renoir, although she wouldn't admit it out loud, and barely could admit it to herself. She longed for news of more dead Scythes, because another killing by Scythe Lucifer would mean that Rowan had not been caught. Renoir had been ended nearly a month ago. She couldn't guess where Rowan was now, or who he was planning to end next. He wasn't limiting himself to mid-American sites, which meant he could be anywhere but here. Your mind wanders, Scythcury observed. This place can do that to you. Citra tried not to linger on those wanderings. Are you ready for conclave next week? She asked. Maurice shrugged. Why wouldn't I be? They'll all be talking about us, Citra said. I mean, after the attempts of our lives. I've been the center of attention at conclave before, Mary said dismissively. And so have you, dear. It's neither negative nor positive in itself. It's what you do with the attention that matters. From the other side of the north pylon came a group of people. They were Daunists, 12 of them. When they weren't traveling alone, Daunists always traveled in groups of either 7 or 12, representing the 7 notes of the diatonic scale and the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. They were ridiculously slavish to the mathematics of music. Daunists could often be found sniffing around architectural ruins, searching for the so-called Great Fork, which was supposed to be hidden within some mortal age bit of engineering. While other people slipped away when they saw sights in the park, the Daunists stood their ground. Some even glared. Citra began to walk toward them. Anastasia, what are you doing? Asked Mary. Just let them be. But Scythe Anastasia wouldn't stop a thing once she had committed herself to it. Neither, for that matter, would Citra Vernova. What order are you? She asked the one who looked like he might be their leader. We are Dorian Daunists, he said, but I can see why that's any of your business. If I wanted you to get a message to someone in a Locrian monastery, would you be able to? He stiffened. We Dorians do not associate with Locrians, he said. They are far too lax in their interpretation of doctrine. Citra sighed. She didn't know what message she'd want to pass on to Grison. Perhaps just gratitude for saving her life. She had been so upset that he hadn't been Rowan that she had treated him poorly and had never ever thanked him for what he had done. Well, it didn't matter now, because clearly no message would be getting to him. You should go, the lead Daunist said to her, his face cold and judgmental. Your stench offends us. Citra actually laughed at him, and her laughter made him redden. She'd come across Daunists who were kind and accepting, others who were all about selling their particular brand of crazy. She made a mental note that Dorian Daunists were assholes. Scythcury came up beside her then. Don't waste your time, Anastasia, she said. They have nothing to offer you but hostility and harangues. I know who You are, said the leader with a caustic enmity even greater than that he'd shown to Sidra. Your early deeds have not been forgotten or forgiven. Someday your score will be settled. Marie writhed with fury. Are you threatening me? No, he said. We leave justice to the universe, and what rings out always goes back. Which Sidra figured was the Tony's version of what goes around comes around. Come, Anastasia, Marie said. These zealots aren't worth another second of our time. Sidra could have just walked away, but the man's attitude begged for her to play with them a little, so she held out her ring. Kiss it, she said to him. Sethgri turned to her, shocked. Anastasia, why on earth would you? But she cut Marie off. I said, kiss it. She knew he wouldn't, but she also suspected that some of the others in the group might be tempted. I'll grant a year of immunity to any of you who steps forward to kiss my ring. Their leader paled, terrified that this turquoise harbinger of natural death might steal his entire flock away. In tone, he shouted to them, drive them away! And they all began a bizarre open-mouthed humming, each of them droning in a different note, until they sounded like a swarm of bees. Sidra lowered her ring and held the leader's gaze for a moment more. Yes, he had triumphed over her temptation, but only barely, and he knew it. She turned her back on them and left with Scythegory. Even though the scythes were gone, they continued to drone, and probably wouldn't stop until their leader told them to. What was the use of that? Marie chided. Haven't you ever heard the expression, leave a cult to its cacophony? Maurice seemed unsettled as they left the park, probably because of the memory of her brother. I'm sorry, Sidra said. I shouldn't have kicked a hornet's nest. No, you shouldn't have. Then, after a moment, she said, as infuriating as Tony's chore, he was right about one thing. Your deeds will always come back to haunt you. It's been almost 150 years since I rooted the rotting vestige of government to clear the path for a better world. I never paid a price for those crimes, but someday the echo will return. Scythegory spoke no more of it, but her words lingered just as powerfully as the Tony's droning, which Sidra could swear she still heard in her head for the rest of the day. There are many moments in my existence where I have been confounded by circumstances beyond my control. What most come to mind are the disasters in space. On the moon, there was a catastrophic leak that exposed the entire supply of liquid oxygen to the vacuum of space, leaving nearly 1,000 people to suffocate, and all attempts to retrieve their bodies for revival met with failure. On Mars, a fledgling colony lasted for almost a year before a fire consumed the entire complex and everyone within it. And the New Hope orbital station, a prototype that I had hoped would eventually form a habitable ring around the Earth, was destroyed when the engines of an approaching shuttle misfired and pierced the station like an arrow through its heart. After the New Hope disaster, I terminated the colonization program, and although I still employ millions in research and development of technologies that could potentially be used in the future, those employees and those facilities often succumb to bad luck. However, I do not believe in bad luck, nor in this circumstance do I believe in accidents or coincidence. Trust me when I say that I have a keen understanding of what things and people are beyond my control. The Thunderhead.